Just wanted to make a quick video showing my workflow for dealing with doing video processing in Shotcut. There's a lot of good tutorials out there already, but it seems like a lot of them assume that you already have a bunch of small clips that you're working with, whereas in my case I've got one really long single file with a bunch of smaller parts in it that I want to cut out. And so it's kind of obvious now in retrospect, but starting out it wasn't really obvious what a good way to deal with that was, and since I found a method that I'm pretty happy with, I wanted to share that. So one thing to point out is that's a little different with Shotcut between other non-linear editors is that you can just open a video directly, and that puts it in what they call the source view, and that's kind of a completely distinct and separate thing from the timeline, which is pretty common with non-linear editors, and the playlist, which you can kind of think of as like the clip bin that other editors have. It's a little more powerful than that, but that's a pretty good analogy. So source is just like yet a third place where you can have video loaded up that's completely distinct from the other two places, and that's actually pretty useful, as I'll show here as we go along. So I've got my master video file that's pretty long, it's almost 3 hours, and I'm going to go ahead and drag that directly down here into the timeline, and I want it on the timeline just primarily so that I can get the waveform view. So if we zoom way out or wait for that to finish processing, what we'll see is that there's a few segments of where there's audio, and then there's some areas with quite a bit of silence in between. And so the major segments that I want to cut out are delimited by the silence, so I want to be able to see that part. So yep, you can see I got a big gap here and a big gap here. So what I like to do is just from the actual project view, I'll find roughly where I want to make my first cut, and I'll actually copy and paste the time code from out of source and put that over here, or out of project rather, and put that over here into the source view. And now I can use the source viewer to rewind, fast forward, and fine-tune exactly where I want my endpoint to be. So let's say that that's here, and I'll set the endpoint. I just do that with the I key. I find that to be the most convenient way to do it. And then similarly for the outcut, I can just search around based on the waveform down here in the project view, and when I get somewhere in close, you can zoom in of course if you need to get more accurate, but I just kind of get a rough idea, and then I'll actually watch it in the source view to really get exactly where I want. And once I've done that, I'll set the outcut, so that's the O key, and now what I can do is I can add this to my playlist. And so by dragging that from the source window over to the playlist, you can also hit the plus button. That adds it as, you can think of it as a clip. So now that I've got an endpoint in 7 minutes and an hour and 32-minute clip. So I can do the same steps here again for the second clip, find roughly where I want to be, and then use those timestamps, reset the endpoint, reset the out point, and now I can add another clip. I'll use the plus button this time. So what you'll see is that even though I've been on the same source video this whole time, the demo.mp4, it's the same underlying video, it's actually added as a distinct clip here, and you can see that because they have different end times and they have different durations. Another thing that's interesting to point out is that this video is it's abutted directly against the previous one, so its start point is exactly the same as the duration here. If your Shotcut GUI looks a little bit differently than mine, I've got this set on detail view. So you can yeah, click this button down here to get that view if you want it. I find that to be nice to do. So now we've got our second clip ready to go, and then I can do those same steps again for the third clip. So I'll go ahead and do that real quick. Copy the endpoint, pick an out point, any old place, and then add that to our playlist. And so what you can actually do at this point is go ahead and export, and you can say export from playlist. And so what that'll do is it'll completely ignore the timeline, which the timeline is not what I want for my final video, but if I want to do just these 3 clips directly on top of each other with no gaps in between, then that's all I need to do. They're already in order and all set up to render exactly like that. So if that's what I was after, I'm done. I can just say export from playlist, and that's what makes the playlist more powerful than the clip bin that a lot of other tools have. So that's kind of nice. But I'll go ahead and show the more traditional workflow as well. So I can get rid of that. Since I'm done slicing up that clip, I'll reset with a blank track, and then I can just drag these down from my quote-unquote clip bin like you would in a normal editor, and we'll just again put those right one after the other. And now I can say export from the timeline. I could also, if I wanted to at this point, do any of the other normal activities. I could make transitions by overlapping them, or add fades or other effects. But at this point, it's pretty much the same as any other tutorial would cover. So, hope you guys found that interesting, and enjoy.